Hello, thanks for joining me for 2 Samuel in summer. This is the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 4. So today is Friday, June 4th, and here is chapter 4. It's a short chapter, not much happens, but the death of Ishmael comes to a sticky end, just like his father and his brothers did. He becomes sick in heart when he finds out this Ishbaal finds out that Abner has been killed. He becomes despondent and he's hanging out in his house. Now, they introduced two new characters to the story. They are Benjamites. And this is interesting because the Benjamites rallied around Abner and now they're with David. So they are Bana and Rechab. I'm going to pronounce it like that way. They're sons of Rimmon, a Benjamite, from Beeroth, which is, maybe that's disputed because it says it's considered to be of Benjamin. The people of Beeroth had fled to Gitanim and are there as resident aliens to this day. Probably the day of this writing, which is much later, but much earlier than now. So this is what happens. There's a story about Saul's grandson Mephibosheth, who was crippled at his feet. And when his nurse learned of his father and his grandfather's death, Jonathan and Saul, this was Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, his nurse picked him up and fled with him, and then he fell. And his name was Mephibosheth. Just hold that. And we go back to the story about the Benjamites. The two Benjamites, the two brothers, they were the kind of the generals of two captains of Saul's raiding bands. They were the two captains of Saul's raiding bands. And they're hedging their bets. So they go and they find Ishbaal. He is reclining on his couch. He's in his bedroom, and they kill him there. It describes how they set out in the heat of the day. They came to his house. He was taking a nap, and they struck him in the stomach. And then they escaped. And then it describes a little bit closer what they did, where he was when they killed him. They behead him and they bring the head to David. Now, as you're reading this, you're thinking, what is David going to do? And David, even when they bring him the head, they're hedging their bets. They're like, King David, you want us to be a part of? Look what we did for you. We got rid of your adversary, Ishbaal, who wants to be king, and you want to be king over all of Israel. Now you can be king of all Israel. And they don't know that when somebody killed Saul and brought him the signa and the spear or the sword, I forget which one it was, he killed that guy. And they don't know that. So they come thinking, oh, David's going to think we're very loyal because we've killed Ishbaal, Saul's son. But we know as the reader that David's probably not going to respond favorably to this, which he does not. He responds in kind to the way he did to the fellow that brought him the stuff about Saul. And he says they've killed a righteous man in his own home, in his own bed. And really that's what they did. In the heat of the day, the noontime rest, in that part of the desert, people were probably, especially the wealthy, were resting at that time of day. And they went inside the house when he was exhausted and killed him. So David even reminds them, when the one who told me, see, Saul is dead, thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and killed him at Ziklag. Remember that? So David's like, remember that? And so this was the reward I gave him for this news. How much more than when wicked men have killed a righteous man on his bed in his own house. So David summoned his men. They came and got the two brothers. They cut off their hands and their feet. And they hung their bodies beside the pool of Hebron. So that's the gory details of chapter 4. And that's what happened. And then there's this other thing. There's this just insert of verse 4, chapter 4, about Mephibosheth. So it's just story, Mephibosheth, rest of the story. I think now we've cleared the way for David to be king of all of Israel, but that's another story on another day. Have a good one.